Kia ora everybody and welcome back to another episode of Untidy. My name's Hannah Davison. I'm a mother of two. I'm the author and co-founder of the My Big Moments children's books, and I'm here with my radiant and bespectacled co-host, Matilda Green.
Oh, thank you so much for noticing my new glasses. Honestly, I feel like the most intelligent person in the world with these glasses on. But yes, anyway, and enough about the specs. My name is Matilda Green. I'm a mum of three and an online content creator. And today on the pod, we have Frances Cook. So a lot of you may recognize her from her former personal finance podcast, Cooking the Books. Well, she now has a brand new chart-topping podcast called Making Sense, where she simplifies financial topics so we can make better choices with our money and make progress financially. It's a great, great podcast. I highly recommend. So Frances is a mum of two, an award-winning journalist, and a best-selling author. Her books, Tales from a Financial Hot Mess and Your Money, Your Future, are a must-read for anyone needing knowledge and inspiration for their financial journey. And if you don't already follow Frances on Instagram or TikTok, you're going to want to do that for bite-sized nuggets of money wisdom. But before we get stuck into all things money, a very warm welcome to you, Frances.
Thank you. I'm going to come on here all the time just to get a little ego boost. That was like the nicest introduction.
It's always a lovely start to a podcast, isn't it? When like you just get a really nice intro and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
just run
It's a
through the
great way to
highlight
butter up,
reel.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Brilliant.
the great thing is podcast evergreen content. You can replay that whenever you want.
Yeah. Hitting subscribe, doing the first 2 minutes of my episode every morning, just starting my day with a glow.
Mhm. It can be your morning affirmation as the untidy intro.
I'm down. I'm down. This sounds fantastic.
Oh, I love that. Right. So, can we start by just rewinding the clock a little bit? So, part of why people I think resonate with you is because of your honesty and authenticity. But I want to be real here. You have talked about you being previously a financial hot mess.
Yeah.
I need to know, like, how bad are we talking?
Yeah.
How much of a financial mess were you?
Well, in one way, I was lucky in that I never got into lots of debt, but that was only because I was so terrified of debt. Like, I knew I was really bad with money. And so I just kind of didn't let myself do anything. I just played possum, wasn't doing much of anything, certainly wasn't going to get ahead in life. And so I hit that sort of late 20s phase. And you've been in the career for a while. I spent far too long at university on the promise of going into a high earning career. You fight for a few pay rises. You are still not getting ahead. And you hit this point in your late 20s, or at least for a lot of people, where you kind of go, right, I don't know why I'm not getting ahead, but I'm hamster wheeling here. I'm working so hard and nothing's changing. And that was the sort of hot mess that I was, where I just was like, I am working myself to the bone and nothing is actually getting ahead. And I don't know how I'm ever going to buy a house. I don't know how I'm going to have kids. I don't know how I'm going to have any sort of financial security. And it was this real, walls closing in sort of feeling. So I was like, right, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I was a journalist. So I was like, right, what's journalism at its core? Go away, find out something you didn't know before, tell other people about it. So I was like, I guess I'll just find out about money on work time and see if I can make that work. And I did. And that was the beginning of everything, really.
That's amazing. And also, it's a great idea because this is how we address a lot of our own problems is by having guests on that we learn from. So, whether it be health, well-being, finances, this is how we go about it. I think
It's
it's
really
just
handy.
it's great use of time.
And you can get some amazing people on a podcast. You say, hey, I have a podcast and I'd love to interview you. And all of a sudden, I've talked to the Reserve Bank or, really top people in different investing firms, and they just come on and give you an hour of their time for free. And you're just like, how did that happen? Sounds great though.
Yeah.
It's so good. What was your childhood like in terms of how you learnt about money or where you learnt about finances? Was that something that was openly discussed in your household with your parents?
Yeah, and I think that was potentially part of the issue is that we didn't really talk about money much. Out of a really good place. My parents tried really hard to give me a good, strong footing, but I think they were definitely of an era where it was people kind of, and you still see a bit of this, but it was stronger then, where they're worried about stressing kids out, about giving them worries that are too big for little shoulders, which I totally get. You do have to be careful about not making an adult problem a child's problem. But at the same time, if you never talk about money, people aren't comfortable about it. They don't know even where to start. They don't have that feeling of, even if you don't know something, you can go out and learn about it, right? And we have so much information at our fingertips now, but you have to be comfortable with the subject to go and search for it. So we did do little things like the early years of my childhood, I was in England. My mom's English and my dad's a New Zealander. So the early years of my childhood, we were in England, and we would do things like we would take little shiny £2 coin, go to the bank, drop it into my savings account, all very cute, very wholesome. And so they tried to instill like the savings habit and stuff like that. Didn't work. Terrible saver, still a terrible saver. But bless them, they tried.
I do wonder that, like how much is sort of like intrinsically you, and
Yeah.
then how much is from the parents, you know?
Yeah.
The age-old question.
I do think people tend to fall into spender or saver, and it is often just a personality thing. I will say though, like I am someone who is naturally a spender. I am still a spender. You can turn your natural personality into a superpower. Spenders are much better at investing because it feels like spending, and you're more comfortable with some of the risks that can go with it. You don't want to be too risky, but spenders can do really, really well, and savers often struggle to let go of that money to do things like investing. So just saying, you're never a lost cause.
That is refreshing to hear, Frances. Finally, my strengths are becoming recognized.
Um, I want to we're going to come back to investing because we've got a lot of questions on this. But I was surprised to learn that while you're now actually a qualified financial advisor and you're an expert and you're an educator, but you didn't start out your career with an interest in finance, particularly like
Not
that
at all.
developed later through your career. So, what was that progression to get to this point? Did you ever see this coming?
It's really funny because I live in Teramutu these days, and a lot of my sort of high school friends are around the area, and so I bump into them. But we've been out of touch for a good 10 years in between, and some of them will be like, "Yeah, wow, really never saw this career coming for you." That was right out of left field. And I really can't blame them on that. They are spot on. Nobody really saw that coming. I liked journalism because I'm nosy, to be honest. I like getting into everyone's business, and journalism is great for that. Um, and I originally started out, I loved crime reporting. So I would do things like reporting on court cases, or, there's been a terrible murder. You go out and you talk to people in the area about, what it's like, what's going on. Loved crime reporting. Very clearly remember when I decided I'd had enough of it. There was a court case where it was a young person. I think they were 17, who had they were a really good kid, had gone to pick up friends from a party. They weren't even at the party themselves. They got bottled. They died. And it was a court case where, the person who bottled them was up for either murder or manslaughter. It was kind of TBD. And the mother of the kid who had died was sitting in the courtroom, just very quietly, very restrainedly sobbing,
Oh.
trying to keep it together, but not. And I that is just seared into my mind. I was like, right, yeah, no, I can't do this anymore. I think this has been enough. I think I am, you almost, it builds up, in terms of seeing other people's worst days. And you hit a point where you're like, I can't take any more of people's worst days. So it started out really excited on that, and then it got really sad. After that, went into politics because apparently I'm a sucker for punishment on just these sorts of things. Loved politics, and then hit a few years in, and I think there's a real split in political reporters where you'll hit about 5 years and then you're either a lifer or you're on to the next. And I could feel myself becoming a very cynical person who didn't believe a single thing anyone ever told me ever. And I was like, that's great for a political reporter. It's a very important skill. Not great as a human being because it's really hard to turn off when you're off the clock. So I was like, right, no, I don't think this is it for me anymore. And that was when
Mm.
I hit the stage of, why are my finances so bad? So I thought, right, how about I shuffle on sideways and hang out with the business team? And yeah, that was it for me. I just really got the bug because I saw how money changes lives. In terms of money itself isn't important, right? But it impacts everything that is important. And it can really help people provide security for their families. It can really help provide that feeling of well-being, really remove a lot of stress. There's so much you can do with money. It's not about building up this pile of gold to feel really smug about and sit on top of, and, like Smaug the dragon or something. It's that it can really change people's lives, especially just a few pieces of low-hanging fruit that are available to everyone. Not everything is accessible to everyone, but there's some low-hanging fruit that is. And if you can get that out there in terms of, hey, make a couple of tweaks to your KiwiSaver. Hey, say this to your boss when you're asking for a raise. Hey, $20 a week into a savings account, you'll have $1,000 in a year. You're going to feel so much happier. And seeing the difference that made for people, getting messages from people, that just got me the bug. It was night and day from those other jobs, really feeling like I was actually, for once, making an impact.
Oh, that's so cool. And you're talking about through the podcast Cooking the Books, is that
Yeah.
right? Yes.
Yeah.
And so what was the reception to that podcast like? Because it's so refreshing to have someone like you share this kind of information. Is that sort of transparency and simplicity is actually quite hard to find for someone like starting out on their financial journey. It can be really confusing.
Yeah.
So how did people take that? Like, was it such a cool feeling knowing that you are really helping people?
Yeah, it was. It was amazing because I've always, social media has always been a really big part of the podcast. And it was how I would make sure I was asking the questions people wanted answered. It was how I would make sure that it was landing right on what they needed to know. And so I'd get lots of messages from people being like, hey, I just bought my first house and we wouldn't have known how the KiwiSaver system worked if you hadn't explained it. All those sorts of things. Which is fantastic. And it's funny, right? Because I see all the time, oh, we should have been taught this in high school, or oh, the financial industry, it gatekeeps. And I've worked now with so many people from across the financial industry. I actually think the financial industry is full of people who are also really passionate about money and how it can make a difference. It's just they're speaking English, but they are almost speaking a different language. By the time they've gone through the training, they haven't even realized that they're now speaking jargon to people. And so you try to tell people what's coming and they just can't sort of make that switch back into normal person language. So for years I would say, no, I'm not a financial expert, I'm a financial translator. That was how I would refer to myself for a long time, because I really felt like we need this intermediary to make it back into the real situations that people face with their money. This isn't I have $3 million. Is that enough to retire? Sort of situation. It's really, I see those sort of headlines pop up and I'm just like, oh my God, spare me, please. Do we really, is this rage bait? But,
And it is. It
I'm
so
sure
is.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah, surely.
So yeah, translating that stuff, it's been really rewarding.
Oh, definitely. Well, just there's such a gap in the market for that. So it's so handy for people to have. And I guess you have a new financial podcast now, Making Sense, and it's great, by the way. Especially loved your episode with the Savvy Saver on
Yes,
Instagram.
isn't she great?
She was so great. Yeah, she was really, really good. But what happened to Cooking the Books? Are you okay to kind of give us a little bit of an overview of what happened?
Yeah, I can give you an overview. I'll have to speak carefully,
Of course.
because certain people like to watch with lawyers on speed dial. But
Shall we put some kind of legal caveat for the lawyers?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Disregard everything we are saying from now. Thank you.
Everything I am saying is honestly held opinion.
Yeah, that should cover it.
There we go. So it's one of those things where Cooking the Books was going for over 7 years, which is wild when I look back at that. And it was, I think, the very first podcast, if not the first, it was among there, but I think it was the very first podcast that NZME did that wasn't just a radio repeat show. And it was because when I hit that stage, I was listening to all of these financial podcasts from the US, and they're talking about things like 401ks and how you handle your health insurance and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, there's obviously some very good info here, but I'm really not sure which bits apply to me and which bits don't. So I'm going to do my own version of this. And it was one of the first New Zealand personal finance podcasts too, which is, it was so fun because there was no pressure. You know, those first few episodes, I was maybe getting like 50, 100 downloads. And now that would never fly. Now they'd be like looking to can you. But, you know, nobody was paying attention. So I could just build up, figure it out, have fun. I always think it's the best to jump in on something when it's brand new because there's no expectations. You can be totally terrible. And then by the time everyone else catches up, you're a bit of an expert. So it's great. And then it ticked along. And then when I hit my second maternity leave, which was, a few months ago now, and I was very surprised to learn that the agreed upon plan for while I was away on maternity leave, I'd been working my butt off, making all these extra episodes, that I had a new boss again. And the new boss wasn't happy with that plan and they were going to bring in someone else and replace me while I was away. And I was like, you're absolutely not. This literally has my name in the title. This is my baby. It's followed me all around the business and it's actually mine anyway. That's disputed for the lawyers, but I have my honestly held opinion that it was mine. And so it all went extremely downhill from there. Several months of wrangling, during which time my baby was born. It was all very stressful. It was awful. And in the end, I resigned. So I guess you could say it was my choice, but was it? But decided, look, if I'm ever going to take the leap and go independent, this is exactly why I should have been independent properly a long time ago. And if you're ever going to do it, now's the time, right? And I think sometimes you hit a stage in a cycle where it has to get really bad before you're ready to take that leap, because this is research that I've come across through the money world, but it's super relevant to everything, is that humans are so strongly wired to prefer what we know, that we prefer what we know even if we know it's not the best thing for us, over the unknown, which could be better but might not. And we're so strongly wired to stick with what we know that we will stay in those bad situations long past where we know we should. And so it finally got bad enough to really push me and be like, we got to go. We got to make the leap. We got to try this. And then within about a month, I gave myself a very short runway to start the new podcast. Suddenly I had sponsors on board. I let my audience know I was starting a new thing. They jumped on board. They hit subscribe, sent it to the top of the charts. Thank you so much to everyone who listened, because that was amazing support. And it actually went really well. And you look back on it now, and obviously I'm only a few months in. I look back at it now and I'm like, wow, that all turned out for the best. But it was terrifying. It was really, really terrifying. And it's such an uncertain time. Got a newborn. I've always been the main earner for my family as well. So pressure was on. And the fact that I managed to make it happen, it's such a win for financial independence, to be honest, because if I hadn't been talking about and following all the things that I do talk about with money, if I didn't have the savings, if I hadn't been building up investments, if I hadn't been learning all these skills the whole way and had that sort of financial cushion to know that I had a few months to try to figure this out, then the reality is I couldn't have done it, because the reality is got to pay the mortgage, got to eat, got to look after the family. And it really was such a huge demonstration of like, wow, this is not just about helping other people. This has really helped me. And I couldn't be here without that. out the other side, it's whole new world. It's pretty great.
It's amazing. Well done. And I know exactly what you mean by sometimes you just have to, it has to get bad enough.
Yeah.
Like the stakes have to kind of be high enough, or you've got to get to a low enough point before you're like, there is no choice but to move forward in this direction,
Yeah.
even though it's scary. So yeah, well done. And making sense, which by the way is spelled CENTS for anyone looking for the podcast, is such a great podcast. I listened to a couple of episodes last night. I'm like, oh, this is so current for me right now.
Brilliant
So
title too.
Thank
Brilliant
you.
title.
Thank you.
yeah.
Because I loved the Cooking the Books title. So I spent a
Yeah.
long time on this one. I was like, it has to be something that I love just as much. And man, it took a long time. But when we landed on Making Sense, we were like, yes, that's the
This
one.
is it. This is it. So satisfying. Frances, do you think that it's important for women to hear other women talking about managing their finances and getting ahead financially?
Yeah, very much. And I think the bigger array of voices we can have in this area, the better. Because I think as well, you have to be able to look at people and say, if they can do it, I can do it. Now, obviously, all of our lives are different. Obviously, it's not as simple as that. But if you can't see anyone who looks like you and has the same concerns as you, who is making it work, then you're just going to rule yourself out of it. You're going to be like, not for people like me. And I think that's a really dangerous thought because we often don't think it consciously. We'll often look back and be like, I was feeling like that wasn't for me for years. And I never really properly thought it through and challenged it. If it's not a conscious thought, it's not big enough to challenge. It will just end up guiding your behavior, and you never make some of those little changes that could help so much. And of course, women have different concerns, different priorities. There's going to be a different way of communicating. Even in my business, I have contractors who I work with who help me with different things. But I have both men and women, and sometimes it's very funny talking to the woman who I work with. It's easier because we communicate in the same way. The men that I work with are fantastic, but there is a different way of talking to people and about things when you're a woman. And I just think it's really, really helpful to have someone who's speaking the same sort of shorthand as you, especially when it's such a delicate topic, right? Because money really cuts to the core of us. It hits on all of those things that are very, very vulnerable. We often use it as a shorthand for how important we are, how smart we are, how well we're doing at life. Now, that's not necessarily true, but it is often how we feel about it. And so if someone speaks about money in a way where we don't feel heard or we don't feel understood, the walls just go up. Don't want to hear any more from you. You don't get it. And then people end up missing out on really valuable knowledge that is truly life-changing. But I don't blame people for putting those walls up because it is truly such a sensitive topic.
Mm. And I think like that's why I really like your podcast, especially that episode that I mentioned earlier, because oftentimes when we hear from people, and like it's good to hear from people of all different walks of life, but it was also really nice to hear from like a stay-at-home mother of two
Mm.
who like doesn't have, she was open about this, doesn't have buckets of disposable income to just invest here, there, and everywhere, but yet she was so onto it and so savvy, as her name would suggest, but with finances, and it made me think, I got so many helpful tips from that,
Yeah.
and sometimes even more so than someone who is incredibly wealthy, like one of the top investors. They bring other tips, obviously, but it's just refreshing to hear from a mother as well on how
Yeah.
she manages it all, and we can kind of relate to each other. And yeah, I guess that's what a female voice brings,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
really refreshing.
And I was super intentional on how I wanted to set up this new podcast. I guess from the experience of doing this for a few years and knowing what had got a lot of feedback from people and what had been really helpful for them. And expertise in the money world is so important. But at the same time, it's one thing to be told, you should do this much percentage into your KiwiSaver because that's the right thing to do. And if you don't, you're very naughty. It's like sometimes with all the best will in the world, that's how the expert stuff comes across. Whereas when you have a real person talking about, here's what I do in my life, here's how I make it work, they've done something amazing like pay off a lot of debt or raise kids on one income or start a business, and they're a real person, they're going to tell you how they did it and what worked for them. It's just more real. So I really wanted a bit of both. So that's why it's the double hitter of the episodes in each week. Every Monday, it's a real person talking about what they've done, how they've made this big achievement. And then every Thursday, we've got someone from the industry being like, okay, now here's what we think you should do in terms of if you want to achieve that sort of stuff, here is the XYZ plan of what works for most people. And I really thought, okay, if we do that, it sort of hopefully keeps it based in reality rather than, like I say, that thing of being told off by some expert who goes to work in Auckland CBD every day and buys as many lattes as they want because no big problem, work credit card is paying for it. I mean, love that for them, but that's not the reality for many of us.
That relatability, and I think also that balance of having, okay, here's some expert opinion which you are also going to help to translate in the moment, and then here's someone who's actually got the boots on the ground and who's doing it is so important, because there's I think when you think about finances, there's a sense of like, and this is an old perception, but that it's not for women, because not that many decades ago, could they even have a bank account,
Exactly.
So, and it's great to see that perception changing over time, because the more that we can be empowered about the decisions that we're making, and the more that we can go, oh, actually, once this idea is broken down, it's actually not that difficult to understand and I can manage it myself. I don't need to outsource that to somebody else, because you immediately think I'm not going to be able to understand it, or I'm not going to be able to manage it, or that's not for me. So do you see that perception changing?
Oh,
Can you see
yeah.
the attitude of women changing?
It's interesting because we do still have fewer women invest than men, but of the women who do invest, they're better at it on average. And it's not magical vagina powers, although we do love magical vagina powers. It's that women tend to make a broad generalization, tend to go in there, do their research, say, righto, learned about this, here's my plan. They set it up, they automate it, and then they stick with it. So women are often more cautious, which can hold them back, but it means that when they get in there, they stick to the plan. Now, men, again, broad generalization, often are more willing to jump into the investing. So they're more happy to take the risk in the first place. But then again, that risk appetite burns them because they try to put money into things, out of things, try some Bitcoin, take it out again, put it into Nvidia, take it out again, trying to beat everyone else's results. And the thing is, when you're taking money in and out and in and out and in and out of investments, you often get hit by a fee every time. So they're getting their money chewed up on fees. That's a surprising wealth killer. But the other thing is, when you're watching it too closely and you're trying to play the game constantly, you react too much to news events, to little market wobbles, and they often end up losing money that way too by trying to get ahead of things. Well, even the experts fail at that. So it's quite funny in terms of, women are still overly cautious, which is a shame, and we're breaking that down bit by bit. But when women get into it, we're really good at it. So just, listen to a couple of podcasts, grab a couple of books, set your plan and go for it, because we're surprisingly good at this.
That's such good feedback. And it's funny, that example that you're giving about, men trying to kind of like beat the system and get ahead and going in and out of things, because this exact thing is happening with a friend of mine. We've both had a bit to invest at the same time. So we've been having conversations about what we've been doing and the choices that we're making with that. And I'm like, he's doing exactly what you just described. And I was like, listen, you're trying to make it too exciting for yourself.
Yes.
You need to find your excitement somewhere else, because then you're making too many moves, and that's how you're losing out,
Warren Buffett says it should be very boring.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, let it be boring, put it in there and walk away.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're onto it. See, I
Try
told you, woman, no.
try and forget about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
on that, so for people listening who want to be more intentional with their money,
Mm.
where should they even start? Like what are the basic foundations for what we should think about and set up financially when we're just getting started?
So this is quite interesting. I've actually been thinking about this a lot recently, because this question comes up. And I actually think the first place to start is your earning power, and your earning potential. People don't often think of themselves as an investment, but you really, really are. Um, I can give people all sorts of tips and tricks on ways to cut back on the budget and all that sort of stuff and find savings and all that. Of course, it's easier if you earn a little bit more. That's just reality. So just take a moment and look at, what your earning potential is, where you want to go, and where that is at for you. You don't have to earn mega bucks, but just make sure you're on the track that you want to be on. And if things are really super duper tight, it's true that there is only so much you can cut back. At the end of the day, you're going to have to pay a certain amount of rent or mortgage. You're going to have to pay a certain amount for food. Food is horrendously expensive. So just have a look at that and decide where you're at and where you want to be. And then it's starting small to really just build some good habits and give yourself some financial confidence, because I think that's another thing that really holds people back is feeling uncomfortable with money and feeling like there's no point even trying to do better. So if you set up $20 auto payment each week into your savings, you're going to hit $1,000 in under a year. And that is going to be, it's really funny. Genuinely, this sounds so silly, but people earning six figures can struggle with that. So it's really one of those things that we just kind of have to get into the savings habit. And having savings on hand is the number one thing they've found that actually reduces money stress. All the other stuff is great, getting financial independence and investing and blah, 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 blah. People tend to focus on that because it's exciting. Fine, cool, love that for you. But having savings on hand is the number one thing that will reduce your daily money stress. So if you just start a little auto payment, get that going. Now, as things change for you with your money, you might increase that, or you might change things. You might go into investing as well. But it's starting to flex that muscle of thinking for your future and looking at ways to improve your money mental health. You're going to get hooked. Once you start to feel that stress falling away, you're going to want to do more. But people are often so busy looking for the big silver bullet, the big change that fixes everything in a week. And they miss that small start that'll get you hooked and will lead to the bigger things.
I was like going to say that's a great tip. And there was at one stage in my life when I was trying to save and I was having difficulty with dipping into it.
Mm.
So what I actually did was I had a bank account with a different bank. And so when that money went out, it went out to like that other bank, which I never really looked at because all my everyday stuff was in the first one. And so then I was like, out of sight, out of mind. It's like hiding the chocolate like in the pantry where you can't see it or putting it in the freezer.
100% endorse that.
That's a really good
That's
tip.
so good.
Oh, I might actually take that up, Bean. That's a handy one.
So what about major things that we should avoid or get out of as soon as we can that's actually going to really be holding us back?
I think the number one thing that I want people to move away from is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where you think that's just not for me. And I think that's the most dangerous mindset in terms of, we all come from different places with money. We all start at different places. And some people have got genuinely money trauma from not having enough when they were growing up, or they're in a career that they feel like, I'm really passionate about this career, but I'm never going to earn that much. So there's just no point. There are little things that are available to almost everyone that it may or may not make you rich, but it will make your life better. It will make your life lower stress. And it might mean that you can also be in a position to help people around you. If you can't be motivated to do it for yourself, do it for the people around you, your kids or your partner or whatever. removing your money stress can also mean you end up helping remove money stress from other people that you love. So I think there's so much you can learn about money, but being ready to say, this isn't working for me. Now I'm going to go look for a different solution. That's the big thing that I hope a lot of people can embrace. Because, like I say, you might not become Warren Buffett. You don't have to become a billionaire overnight. You might never invest ever, and that's fine. But maybe you'll change your KiwiSaver. Maybe you'll set up a little emergency savings, and that will stop you from having to get into credit card debt when the car gets a flat tire. You know, all of these things are so worthwhile. And especially, you know, talking to a lot of mums here, if you are able to then pass along that attitude to your kids, things are going to change, right? Who knows what's going to happen with digital currencies, cryptocurrencies is, you know, the big thing at the moment. Who knows if that's going to turn into something? But I can tell you that I'm pretty sure that in 20, 30 years, the world is going to be quite different. If the only thing you pass along to your kids is the ability to be comfortable enough with money to then say, I don't understand that, I'm going to go figure it out, you have actually just given them a superpower. You don't have to leave a lot of money to your kids. People are often very focused on, I need to give them a nest egg. I need to help them buy their first home. I need to this, that, and the other. Obviously, that's amazing if you can give them that gift. That's amazing for them. But if you can't, you are still giving them a huge gift by making them feel comfortable with money, comfortable asking questions about money, comfortable learning more about it, because things are going to change anyway.
Great. And you mentioned briefly about KiwiSaver.
Yes.
What are your top recommendations for how to make the most of KiwiSaver?
Okay, so there is this fantastic website. It is totally independent. It is free. It is not trying to sell you anything. It is government run. And it is the Sorted Fund Finder. If you just Google Sorted Fund Finder, it's going to come right up. And
We'll
it
put the link in the show notes.
yeah, excellent. And it gives you like a little 15-minute quiz, super quick and easy, where it asks you, you know, how long have you got until retirement? You know, how comfortable are you with the market going up and down? And then it will help you figure out if you should be in conservative or balanced or growth accounts as the main types. So that's a really, really important question, because you can put the exact same money into KiwiSaver and get a totally different result depending on what type of fund you put it in. And it's no extra money from you. You've just slightly changed your KiwiSaver. So when I first started looking into this, I was on a very I would say a low salary at that time. It was probably mid-range for a journalist, but journalists aren't paid that much. So so I was on okay money for a journalist, terrible money for most people. And so I looked into this using my real salary at the time, and I projected I was in a conservative KiwiSaver at the time, because I'd heard that you could make these differences with your KiwiSaver. But it kind of all just sounded complicated and confusing, and so I just didn't get around to it for literally years. This has been hanging over my head for years. And so I was like, right, I'm finally going to look at this. I'm going to crunch the numbers on me, and I'll finally get around to it, because now it's work related, so I can finally spend some time on it.
It's justified.
Yeah, exactly. And so what was it? It was $200,000 at that time. If I kept putting in the same amount of money into a conservative KiwiSaver, it was $200,000 by retirement, which, yeah, hey, nice. Nobody's going to say no to that. And then I thought, okay, and I switch it to the projections for a regular growth account. And so that just means you go from things like term deposit savings into things like shares and property, but it's all run by professionals, so it's all very good. And the difference, no extra money from me, nothing else changed, just changing from conservative to growth, I got over $400,000. And so more than doubled my money for the sake of 10 minutes comparing accounts and switching to growth.
Oh my
Wow.
10
gosh.
minutes, which is wild.
That is wild. Like, I remember when I first started working full time, I was only 17 and I had not a clue
Yeah.
about anything to do with finances. I didn't even know what KiwiSaver was. I
Yeah.
think I was earning like $21,000 a year or something.
Sounds about right.
And yeah, and I remember in the form I was going to tick, which KiwiSaver I was going to do, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll just go conservative. I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, cool, conservative. That sounds like the safest option because growth feels a bit risky, scary. But wow, it's incredible how much you can find out in such a short amount of time. It
Yeah.
is so worth looking into.
Yeah, and
Oh my
it
goodness
feels
me.
hard, right? Because you're like, "Oh god, there's so many KiwiSaver providers, which one do I pick?" And that's why
Mm,
the Sorted Fund Finder is amazing because they will help you look at your personal goals, help you figure out which one you should be in, and then they also rank the options for you. So, it's just brilliant. It makes it so easy because god, there's a lot of KiwiSaver providers out there. We need something that makes it easy, right?
yes, yes, 100%. Now, can we also talk a bit more about investing? So I think there's been a narrative, we spoke about it briefly, about investing only being for rich people with bags of disposable income, men in suits carrying briefcases, that sort of thing. But recently it feels like that's really shifting. So can investing be for everybody?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the best thing about, New Zealanders have often loved the idea of an investment property, right? And I get it. It makes sense. We live in houses, we understand them. Cool, an investment property. But how many people have a spare 100K around? Actually, often probably way more than that these days to just dump on all into one investment. I mean, that terrifies me for starters. But spreading your money around through different investments is great. Who's going to be able to do that with property? And that's why I love, you know, things like Sharesies and Kernel and Hatch have all just popped up in the last few years, but they're legitimate companies. They are properly regulated. They're proper financial companies. And they make it so easy where you can start investing with $1. And that's amazing because I literally started my investments with $5 a week. People will often be like, is that enough? Is that worth it? And it's the same thing as with the savings. You probably will at some point in the future invest more than that, right? As things go along, hopefully your investing goes well. It starts earning money alongside you. So you can invest both your money and your investment money. That's the power of it. It's great. Your dollars are working for you too. Um, but it's starting with that $5 kind of breaks the seal in terms of it's a bit freaky. You're not quite sure what you're doing. Well, $5 is a lot less pressure than 500, right? So you can just kind of get started where you are with what you have and you get going on it. And putting in $5 a week is actually a really good investing strategy. Little bits regularly is actually a really, really smart investing strategy. And the fact that we've got these, they call them micro investing platforms. The fact that we've got these available to everyone now, love it. So good. Change the
Mm.
game.
They are so helpful. And then that becomes the motivator, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Like when you start to see returns, then you want to do more to see more returns.
Yeah.
But I did have a brief stint after watching a movie when I wanted to become a day trader. So I was like, this looks like my kind of thing. And then I realized I had absolutely no clue what it was all about. And honestly, I actually couldn't be bothered learning.
Day trading
So
sucks. No,
it
I
seems
don't.
like it actually sucks.
Yeah.
Like when I looked into it, I was like, not as glamorous as I had initially thought, but
What do you
that's
need? Like
okay.
5 different screens and you're watching all these graphs and stuff, and my brain just goes, no, thank you.
Same. I don't know what I was thinking. But can you invest in the share market like as a total novice
Mm.
with no clue how it works?
We don't want to have no clue how it works because then something's going to happen. Like the market quite regularly does go down in value. And that's all
Hmm.
normal and part of it and actually part of how you make money. But the first time it happens, it's gonna freak you out. It's not fun. And that's also great, why it's great to start with things like the $5, right? Because you've got less money online and it's less likely to freak you out. But at the same time, normal things are going to go wrong. That if you have a little bit of knowledge, you're going to look at and go, oh, yeah, that's no problem. I'll just wait that out. Whereas if you go into it totally green, you might panic, rip all your money out, lose a bunch of it, and then you're never going to want to do it again. So I think you start off with, listening to a couple of podcasts or an audiobook or whatever works for you. Just make sure it's good information. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. Make sure you're getting some good, proper information. Head along to your library or whatever. But you don't need to know too much. Like, I think if you've been learning about investing for over a year and you're still like, oh, I don't know if I know the perfect option, there's no perfect option. That's fine. Just get going. You can change as you go. So it's that real balance of you want to know enough to feel comfortable, but you don't need to know heaps. Like, I'm still someone, there's these wonderful things called index funds where it puts your money into a bunch of different companies. There's things like the NZX 50, which is the top 50 companies in New Zealand. There's the US 500, the top 500 companies over in the US. And you just, it does all of this automatically. It's a computer monitoring it for you. So it's very cheap, it's very easy. And you're basically saying, New Zealand isn't going to fall apart anytime soon, we hope. And so the top 50 companies in New Zealand, probably going to be fine. I'm going to put my $5, it spreads it across those. Easy peasy. Index funds are still the main way that I invest. I talk about this stuff all day long. I talk to experts all day long. And yet, what really matters in terms of investing is getting on with it. And it's very funny because, again, we were talking about the difference between men and women before, right? I love my husband so much. But I'm going to throw him right under the bus. he loves to pick an individual company and be like, I think they're going to go really great. They've really got something here. They're going to shoot up in value. They're going to make heaps of money and I'm going to invest in them. So he has some funds and then he has some individual company picks. And I think the last time I checked, it's like 95% index funds. I've got a couple of little bits and bobs, but it's very, very small. Index and chill, my friends. Index and chill. And he constantly tries to compare our percentage returns on our little investing apps. And he'll be like, this one, my investments have shot away this week. I know I'm beating you now. Come and check. And I'll bring mine up. And I'm like, all right, here's my number. What's yours? And he's like, oh, damn it. You're still beating me. And I have spent so much less time on it than him.
Index and chill. That is
Right?
such a good strategy. Yeah,
It's
because
the best.
I know exactly what you mean. Like, we've kind of got, I'm exactly the same as you. I'm very much like index funds. Let's just keep it simple and I don't want to be too stressed. But then I've also got like a little bit that I play with that I'm like, oh, maybe I can kind of get a bit like, I think this is going to go well. And, this company seems to be on the rise, and then I feel like I am an active participant when really it's such a
Yes.
small amount that it's okay. Like it's not our life savings. Whereas like life savings, index funds. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm
Love
not
it.
going to be nitpicking with the life savings personally.
Maddie, that's good advice, I reckon, for keeping it fun and keeping it exciting and keeping it interesting. If like what you need is a little bit of excitement, like while the rest is away doing its boring long-term thing, just take a percentage that you can afford and be like, and this is where we like play and we use it to learn and try things out. And if we lose it, it's not the house,
It's not going to cripple you. Yeah.
It's not going to cripple you, but you still get to kind of play around with it. And I think it's a good way to stay engaged in what's happening and learning and sort of just stay tuned in.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if you know,
definitely.
that's actually a strategy called the core satellite strategy. Did you know?
No.
Did not
There you
know.
go. So experts do recommend it to help you stay interested. Core satellite is you might put, let's say 80% into something like index funds, and then you keep 20% or less for your spicy picks. And it helps you have your good, solid investing strategy where you're not going to lose everything, but you also stay interested. So there you go. You're a financial expert. You didn't even know it.
Oh,
Look at us
Maddie.
go.
Oh.
And how can we decide what the best platform for investing is for us?
Yeah, see, this is tricky because there was just a pat answer I could give on that a few years ago. But as there's been more people come into the investing space, they're really trying to target these new investors. People have changed their fees. Now, unfortunately, it very much depends on how often are you investing, how much do you have to invest, and what do you want. So I wish I could give it just a stock standard answer, but I would say before we even get into this, even if you just get started, you can change your investing platform later on. It's still more important to just get cracking, look at it, and you can always shift later if you're like, oh, hang on, didn't realize the fees were quite so high, or I have more money now, and so now I'm going to shift over here. That's fine. So there are ones that they specialize in index funds. That would be places like Kernel. So they're a very cheap provider. Simplicity is also very cheap. So if you just want an index fund that's really cheap and you chuck your money in and you leave it alone, those are great. If you are wanting really wide access to the US markets, the Australian markets, New Zealand, places like Sharesies give you the really wide access, but you are going to pay a little bit more. They increased their fees, and so it is a little bit more expensive now. Although, if you have more to invest, they give you a bit of a discount if you sign up for one of their plans. So, this is where it all comes into play, where unfortunately, you have to sort of decide what's the strategy, what sort of things am I wanting to invest in, who's got that, and then who's going to be the best value option, because do not ignore fees. They are really sneaky. They nibble away at your money and they take bigger chunks than you would think. So decide what you want first, then look at how much it will cost you.
Mhm. And you've got courses
I
to
do.
help people, don't they? Tell us about your courses.
Yes. So I've got my overall money boot camp, which used to be called Money Made Simple. And that gives you sort of the 101 overview of everything that I wish I knew about money when I started out. So it is money mindset, as well as things like managing debt and also getting started on investing and your KiwiSaver. And then we have investing made simple, which I love and has been super popular. And that is a deep dive into investing, the different strategies. We do things like compare the platforms so that you can know which one's the right one for you. Um, and people love that one. It's funny though, because I feel like Money Boot Camp gives people the most value, but people always just want to dive into investing. So give the people what they want.
Yes, totally. And another question about investing. So, for people that are living paycheck to paycheck,
Mm,
uh, like I know we've spoken about investing being for everyone, but
mm.
is it for people living paycheck to paycheck, or what are some small things they could do to start to improve their financial future?
Yeah, you definitely want your financial foundations sorted first. So you definitely want to figure out if you're living paycheck to paycheck, is it a spending problem or an income problem? And that answer is something that I think only the person involved can give. But you need to really, brutally honest, look at what's going on. Is there an issue where you might need to start getting strategic with your career or start a little side hustle, maybe even just for a little while? Or is it that you're spending too much on certain things, whether it's your housing, your car, your lattes? God, I love my lattes, but there's a time and a place. And it's, which one is it for you and how are you going to tackle that? Um, if you have high interest debt, things like credit cards or car loans, those will often cost you more than you will make through investments. So, getting rid of that high interest debt, really important. And then having a little bit of savings, because savings will make sure that you don't get A, sucked into more debt, but B, it lets you start planning. It gives you that security. If something goes wrong, your cat gets sick, you have to take them to the vet at midnight, it costs you an arm and a leg. You don't want to be pulling money out of investments to pay for that, because that's how you lose money investing. Investing is for money that you can leave alone for 5 to 10 years, really, just in case something happens with the market. You don't want to be caught out by the market going down and then you're in a bit of trouble. And so you need those financial foundations of you've figured out what's happening with your money, you've got a plan to get comfortable, you've sorted out any debt, you've got a bit of savings, then you're ready for investing. And like I say, you can totally get started small, but make sure those foundations are there to keep you steady through it.
And for people who are preparing to have children, I
Mm.
mean, they are not cheap. you're going to need to take some leave. And, maternity leave, if you're getting maternity leave pay, that's only a portion of your income. So what are some ideas on how to financially prepare for starting a family?
Yeah, and I just want to say on as we start this, it's tricky, right? And everyone's family is different. So really, putting that front and center first. It's one of those where the stock standard answer for a long time was see if you can live on one income before going on leave. Because what will happen there is you're practicing and seeing, what costs you can cut and how you can manage that, but also everything that you're not spending in that time, you're putting into your savings. And it's sort of a nice little 2-for-1 whammy. Um, but now with the cost of living going up so much, that almost feels a bit out of touch to say to people, because I think so many people are just barely scraping by on 2 incomes that it is quite hard. So I think you've just got to have a really good, sit down. Usually I say when couples are having a money chat, get a bottle of wine. Maybe not if you're pregnant, but get a packet of Tim Tams or whatever. Bribe yourself with something that makes the experience more fun. Sit down, have a really good look at your bank statement for the last month. Be really honest about what could you cut, but also what are some of the costs that are associated with you going to work. Maybe you're going to save on transport. So look at all of those things, take a really good view on that, and see if you can cut all of those in the lead up to it so that you can have those savings built up. Because obviously we do get the 6 months of paid parental leave, but it is for some people not as much as they would be making. And for a lot of people, they want to take that full year, and you don't get paid for the full year unless your company is really nice and does it out of the goodness of their hearts. So have a little look at how long you can make that work for. Also, though, this is an underrated money tip, is really use your community. And I think a lot of people forget that. We are not meant to do this all by ourselves. Sometimes we have to, which is hard. But if you've got a community that can and wants to help you, use them. Because I think sometimes we're a bit shy to ask for help, whereas other people are too shy to offer. And they want to help, they want to be involved in it. Now, community is never perfect. Sometimes they'll be getting all up in your business and wanting to offer you advice, and you just don't want to hear another different opinion on how babies should sleep and why. But at the same time, if that annoying opinion comes with someone who will hold your baby while you get some sleep, that's gonna be great. And maybe they'll bring around some food for you guys, and maybe they'll let you borrow the car while you head to another doctor's appointment or whatever else. Community can help in all sorts of ways that are both financial and not financial. And even if it's dropping off a few meals, that can be so, so useful. And even if they are reducing your stress, you're not going to maybe make some impulse purchases that we use to try and give ourselves a dopamine hit. So just really lean into every single resource you can, including the non-financial ones, because people want to help you. Let them. I say that as someone who is really bad at asking for help. So maybe this is just me doing my own therapy session to me.
It's so true though, isn't it? I always try and remind people that like don't like asking for help or
Mm,
taking someone up on the offer. Like it's a gift to them as
yeah,
well. Like if someone has offered to help you, they want to help you
yeah,
because it makes them feel good too. And so it is a win-win situation if you can take them up on that.
yeah.
But talking about money tips
Mm,
and how expensive food is. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
yeah.
Finances are really stretched for a lot of people at the moment. So, do
Mm.
you have any like go to budgeting tips to help parents listening be able to cut some costs for their family?
Yeah, and I think the first thing is going to be, what are your priorities? What do you have to have? What do you want to have? And I think that often actually looks different from people than what they expect. So, we mentioned my courses earlier, and one of the things we do in Money Bootcamp is you have to keep a money diary for a week. People hate this. They hate it so much.
So confronting.
Yeah. And I'm always like, you can do it for longer than a week if you find it helpful. And nobody wants to do it for longer than a week. They so begrudgingly do it for a week. And so what you do is you write down everything you've spent for that day. Honestly, literally $2 for a candy bar, chuck it in. And next to that, how much did you need to spend it? And I mean truly need. If you took the car out and you've got good buses, then that might be a 5 out of 10 need. And then the next thing that people often underrate, how happy did it make you? And that is just as important as the need factor, because if you try to put yourself on the money equivalent of a crash diet, it will not work. It might work on the numbers. You will never stick to it. It will not happen. So how much did you need it and how happy did it make you? The thing is, there have always been, I've not had someone yet who's come out of that and said everything is 10 out of 10 need and 10 out of 10 happiness. There's always been some stuff in there that they didn't need or make them happy. They just kind of didn't realize because it sneaks in there and it becomes habit. You're not really thinking about it properly. So you cut those because who cares? And then the needs and the happiness spending, you look at it and say, okay, how can I do a smarter version of this? And one of the things I did back in 2020 as a New Year's resolution, because I did not know 2020 was going to be quite challenging enough, thank you, before all of that happened, I set myself a little resolution where I was only going to buy secondhand clothes that year, because my happiness spending is clothes. I just absolutely love it. It gives me a little dopamine hit every time. But I was looking at it and going, this is not sustainable. I can't buy the things I want. And even when I do try and be smart about it and not get too much, it's still not in budget. I don't know how I'm going to make this work. So, all right, only secondhand the whole year. Let's see what we can do. And I've actually ended up never going back. I still buy so much of my stuff secondhand because you get it for a fraction of the price. I love the little hunt. I feel so smart when I find something good. And it means that I get that happiness boost at the same time as staying on budget. So it's just win-win-win all round. But if I was to follow some more traditional methods of budgeting, it would be like, stop spending on silly things, you vain young lady. And I'm like, yes, I am vain. What's the problem? So it's be realistic about what you want and what you need. And then instead of bashing yourself over the head and being like, oh, why do I always spend like that? I'm a terrible, bad person. Look at it and go, okay, how can I do this smarter? What can I do with this? And then it's cutting back and cutting out and whatever. But once you know your priorities, it's going to be different from what you thought originally.
Okay, that's great. So we want to foster a good relationship with money with our kids. We've sort of touched on this, but what sort of conversations should we be having with our kids about money? Because something that I think about is that, like, I don't want to give them any sort of poverty or scarcity consciousness, but we still have to be smart about where we're spending and what we're spending things on and how much. And sometimes it's okay to spend and like go out for dinner or something, and sometimes it's not the week for it. So, like, what sort of conversations should we be having, and what sort of language should we be using with our kids?
Yeah, and I think it's really important just having the conversation, right? We talked about this at the very beginning where I didn't have those conversations, so I wasn't very comfortable with money. And I think one of the things we really work on, and I mean, bearing in mind, right, my kid, one of them is a baby. So, best thing about a baby, no back chat.
Not demanding verbally just quite yet.
Yeah. Plenty of sass, but it's all just facial expressions. So that's cool, buddy. You do you. That's pretty easy for me to ignore. But, having dinner with a toddler, there's a lot of interruptions to give me the latest updates on Paw Patrol or his kindy friends. So, bearing in mind that it is difficult to have adult conversations, still, we do try to have our normal conversations in front of the kids. And so just if money comes up, they're exposed to that and it's a conversation the whole time. And we'll do little things like in my household, we are not above bribery, not in the slightest.
Love it.
And so again, the Paw Patrol obsession. My little dude was telling me how badly he wanted a chase toy. So I decided I was going to try and bribe him to pick up his toys every night. So this chase toy was $30. And so I kind of worked backwards from there and was like, how long an attention span can a toddler have? So I decided maybe 6 nights in a row was possible, which meant it was $5 a time. I'm aware that's like a slightly high amount to be giving a toddler for cleaning up his toys, but it was more based on the attention span than the dollar amount. So I
Yeah.
said,
He's
listen,
got no context just yet. So
right?
it's fine.
It's the pretty orange one. Yay.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, buddy, if you clean up your toys every night, and I'll help you, but clean up your toys, you get $5. You need 6 of them, and then we can go to the store and we can get Chase together. And he was sort of like, okay. And the first 3 nights, he was super enthusiastic. And after that, he started to wane and was a bit like, when am I getting Chase? But I really sort of kept him on. It was like, you're nearly there. You need 2 more. We got this. We're gonna go. Yeah, sweet. 1 more. We can do this. Yep. And then took him to the store and was like, right, look, here's all of your $5. You saved it up, and now you can get Chase. And obviously, this is super simple, right? But it's just introducing him to the concept of this is money. You had to do something to earn it. You build it up. You have a little bit of delayed gratification. Now here's your reward. You know, the irony being that he then saw a different police themed thing as soon as we walked in the door, and he wanted that instead. So we still don't have the chase toy.
We're just beginning. We're starting. We're learning.
We had delayed gratification, but then immediate distraction. So he's still very 3.
That's so funny. I think it's good advice to be able to have the financial conversations around the kids. I think when it's like you're super stressed and freaked
Yes.
out though, like maybe that's the time where that's not in front of the
Yes.
kids, you know, like that's just with your partner or whatever. Because it's that kind of attitude. Like I still have this picture in my mind when I was a kid, of like it was when end of financial year would roll around. My dad wasn't particularly stringent with his filing. And so when he had to get all of his stuff back to the accountant, it would be like spread out all over the office floor. Mum would be like, just don't go in there. Don't bother him. He was very stressed. It was very like, you know, anxious time. And so there was something, you know, I made that connection between this kind of like financial thing that happened once a year and dad's tension, you know, and his stress about it. And I've never forgotten that, you know, and even if money is tight or it's difficult or, you know, there's pressure on the way that our attitude and approaching, you know, finding a solution matters. And I think if you come at it with like, you know, it's always tight or it's always stressful or this causes arguments or whatever, then that can be quite difficult to unburden yourself from later. I actually had a funny negotiation with my son this morning because he's now on school holidays. And I was like, well, how am I going to make this win-win? Mostly for me. And I was like, listen, do you want to earn some money today? He's like, how much? And I'm like, God, he's not going to go to work for nothing. And I was like, $10. He's like, what's it for? I said, cleaning the car. And he said, wait a second. How much do you pay when we go through a car wash to clean the car?
Oh,
Like,
no,
oh, damn it.
He's clever.
I know. I was like, well, you know, I think the cheapest one's $12. I obviously always get the like more expensive one, but I think the cheapest one's $12. He goes, that's just for the outside. You want me to clean the inside and the outside? I was like, yes, I do. He's like, so that should be $24.
Alex, he's so clever. That's
This is
amazing.
brilliant.
And I was
You're
like-
raising a lawyer or something. It's
What a
great.
nightmare. I know. And I was like, you make a fair point and I appreciate the negotiation. I'm prepared to offer 20. That's my final offer because part of the reason we're doing it at home is to save money. I'm happy to pay you for it. Do we have a deal? Yes, we have a deal. He goes, I just realized what maths is for.
So many life lessons in one.
And a clean car.
It's so good.
That is
It's so
hilarious.
good. It's so good.
If you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self
Mm.
3 financial tips, what would you say?
Oh, okay. Oh, this is really good. Okay, 18-year-old me. I suppose stop being such a muppet doesn't really count with my whole stay positive about money mindset. um, I think probably the first one would be just accept that you're capable of so much more than you think you are. Because, when I say my high school friends wouldn't have seen this coming for me and me neither, I actually think that was a key reason why I didn't do so well for so long. I was one of those people who said, this isn't for people like me. So, for starters, 18-year-old me, you're capable of so much more than you think you are, and you can figure this all out, and it's not that confusing. Okay, secondly, would be just get started. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to get on with it. Time is one of the biggest ways for helping you make more money with less effort. The sooner you start, the better. You're younger today than you will be tomorrow. So just get on with it, even if it's not perfect. You can always change as you go. Last one. Well, I was already with my partner then. I met my partner actually quite young. We met in the last year of high school, which is very gross and cute. But we,
So cute.
I would say this to most people. And if I hadn't met my partner, I definitely would have been saying this to me. Um, your life partner is actually a financial decision as much as anything else. Because if you have someone who doesn't support you in your goals, who isn't rooting for you, wants you to do really well, it's going to be hard because there are going to be times when you're going to have to work harder and not see the reward yet. And if they're not on board with that as your life partner, that's going to make it really, really tough to do those things that will eventually get you ahead. So, yeah, your life partner is so important. It's a financial decision as well as a heart decision. Love, unfortunately, isn't always enough. And so, yeah, choose carefully and pick someone who your mum would be really happy for you to be with. Pick someone who your mum would be like, yes, this person's going to cherish you.
Frances, you have been so amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. And if people want to connect with you or find your resources, where should they go?
Frances Cook NZ, Frances spelled with an E, on pretty much all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And if you head to my website, francescook.co.nz, you can also sign up to my newsletter, The Money Memo. Get a free money tip in your inbox every week and don't have to worry so much about social media algorithms keeping us apart.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, Hannah just messaged me saying that she can hear and see us, and she says to say thank you too. So
Thanks, Hannah.
she's just dropped off the face of the earth somehow. But Frances, thank you again. We so have loved having you on. It's
Oh,
been
I've
brilliant.
loved it. It's been the nicest chat. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Untidy. If you enjoyed it, we would really love your help to support us to continue to make the show. Things you can do that make a huge difference is subscribing to the show so you never miss an episode. You can also leave us a little 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And of course, please share this podcast with your mates. It means that we can continue to build this community, keep putting out untidy episodes, and just keep doing what we love to do.
And don't forget to check out mybigmoments.com for kids' books that make your tricky job of parenting just a whole lot easier. Untidy listeners get a discount at checkout, so just pop in Untidy for 10% off your order when you check out. And lastly, we would like to thank all of the good people that make this podcast possible: Flicker Williams and Joe Rocker at My Big Moments for the beautiful artwork and design, and Maxine London Creative for editing this episode. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. We'll see you soon. Mā te wā.